worked on throughout the whole semester. And I, just kind of finished it. And if you saw the title, you kind of know. You, of course, saw the title. You didn't click on the video without seeing the title. You kind of understand what it's about. My heart has been, racing. And this thing is supposed to be 10 minutes or less. And I know I'm going to make it more than 10 minutes. I just tried to, do it in 10 minutes. And I was speaking so fast. You probably can't understand what I'm saying. But I need to get this. I want to record this and put it out on the internet. Because I think it's funny, and also I want feedback in case there's anything I can change last minute, but there really isn't because it's kind of due tomorrow. So, I don't know why I think I'm more filming this to bring myself comfort, to be like, okay, this is a real project, it's done, but I feel like it's bad. I don't fully know what point I'm making, because you have to be so, philosophical in this class, and it's kind of hard, but this class is cool regardless. So let's get into this, basically. Okay. Welcome. This is Vampires and Supernatural Season 6, Episode 5, Live Free or Twy Hard. So first, this episode aired October 22nd, 2010, with 327 total Supernatural episodes. The director is Rod Hardy. This is the only Supernatural episode that he has directed, and he mostly did, Western or sci-fi stuff, and Thirst is, a 1979 movie, is the only vampire media I have found. Oh my gosh! The writer is Brett. So that's his Twitter bio. I just thought it'd be funny to add, because it seemed relevant. He wrote for episodes for all of season 6, and this season 6 is a lot about the alpha vampire, which I'll get more into, so it kind of makes sense that he would write for all those vampire episodes. He produced and wrote for a decent portion of Legacies, The Vampire Diaries, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and its spin-off Angels. And then, of course, you have the creator Eric Kripke, which I just thought I should mention. Dean and Sam are the two, main characters. They're brothers, Dean older, Sam younger. Their father was a hunter after their mother died, and Dean used to hunt with him. And Sam didn't. Sam went off to college, but then their dad died. Sam's girlfriend died, so Dean and Sam came together and decided to start hunting again. Hunting monsters, by the way. Monster hunters. Rah. You have Samuel Campbell in this episode. He is their grandfather on their mother's side, who also happens to be a hunter. Just, I forgot how. Boris is, the main vampire in this episode. He's, the head vampire that we see. Then you have Robert and Kristen. Robert is a vampire. He works for Boris. And Kristen is a 17-year-old girl who just loves vampires, and she's, a victim to Robert. She meets him online. And the funny thing here is, Robert Pattinson, Kristen Stewart, there's a bunch of, kind of, Twilight references and, kind of poking fun at Twilight a little bit here, and, that's one of them, and I thought that was really funny. So, quick summary. You have Kristen. She is at the club. She's going to meet Robert, who she met online. He claimed to be a vampire online, and she, loves vampires. She's like, oh my god, I'm going to date a vampire, whatever. So he plays this act really well. He's like, oh, you can't be with me. It's not safe. You can't do this. And she's like, no, I know what I want. He's like, okay, let's go on a walk. So they're going on a walk, and she's like, where are you taking me? And he's dropping the act a bit. He's like, girl, just follow me. And then, oh no, Boris is here. And then they capture her and turn her into a vampire, and she's not captured. Sam and Dean are doing their monster hunting thing, and they're talking to Kristen's family, being like, hey, your daughter's missing, what's going on? They go to her room, and they see this, Twilight knockoff poster, oh, she loves the vampires, and they see her talking to him online, and being like, oh, vampires can just write bad poetry and get girls, and, feed on them, and they'll think that they're gonna, be in love forever, but they're just their victims. And so they figure out that she went to the club, so they're at the club, and Dean and Sam decide to split up because they see two suspicious-looking guys. So Sam goes and kills the first vampire, and it's a very easy kill. And then Dean goes and finds the other guy, and he's just, a random human pretending to be a vampire to try and get laid. So he's like, take those out. You're stupid. This is stupid. Go home. And then Boris pops out of nowhere, and he's, flirting with Dean. He's like, you're pretty. And Dean's like, sorry, pal, I don't play for your team. Which, you are bisexual. Sorry, you're bisexual. But that's not the point. Boris then sends Dean, flying into the dumpsters, and Boris, bites his wrist, makes himself bleed, and then makes Dean, drink his blood or whatever. That's what's happening right now. And Sam is watching in the background. Sam actually doesn't have his soul right now. His soul is in hell, but I'll get more into that later. So Dean is now a vampire because he ingested Boris's blood, and he's all emo. He's like, I'm gonna have to kill myself. He hates vampires. He's like, I can't live like this. I can't be a monster. I'm a monster hunter. This is crazy. He goes and says goodbye to his girlfriend, and then he comes back, and Grandpa Campbell is like, hey boys, I have a cure, but it hasn't been used in super long. And Dean, you can't drink any human blood, and we need the blood of the vampire that turned you. We need Boris's blood. So he's like, okay, let me go see Boris. He goes and sees Boris, and Boris is like, yeah, vampires are portrayed as sexy now in media, so it's so easy to find girls who want to be with you and sleep with you, but you just get them and you turn them, and he locks them in these cages until they turn compliant, and he's basically just like trying to get more vampires to be populated in this world, and Dean's like, okay, whatever. And so he's trying to get closer to him, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna stab him with this dead man's blood so I can take his blood. You know, the dead man's blood weakens him. And then the dead man's blood, like the blood from the syringe, like drips on the ground. Boris hears it, and Boris grabs Dean, and like he's like, "You're not playing games with me, are you, boy?" And that's the scene right now. But then they start hearing this like ringing noise, and they all like fall to the ground and pass out. So they like stop fighting, and then we get all these like visions of the alpha vampire. That's who's on the bottom, and these two like vampire girls. And this only lasts for like 5 seconds. Like it's very short. Like this is all you see of the alpha vampire in this episode. But it's very confusing. And then Dean wakes up, and Boris and everyone else is awake too, and they're like getting ready to attack him. So Dean's like, okay, I guess I gotta kill all these vampires. So Dean kills all the vampires, including Boris. That's Boris's dead body in this scene and his decapitated head. And then Sam and Campbell come and find Dean like this, and they're like, oh, wow. And then trigger warning, vomit, but it's not that big of a deal. Dean then takes the cure and then throws up a bunch of like black, purple liquid, and then he's a human again. So what are vampires? They drink animal blood, but like mainly human blood. Animal blood does not taste as good. They're turned by ingesting the blood of a vampire. They all originate from the alpha vampire. They can only be killed by decapitation. They don't have a grave. And later in the show, other methods develop, but they like aren't super important. Like they're like angel related, so like it's not important right now. And dead men's blood also. Oops, they're going extinct. Talked about a lot throughout the show. They live together in nests. Usually, the vampires will work under the vampire who turned them. So, like, Boris in this situation. And also, this is something you see in, like, Interview with the Vampire. And then dead man's blood weakens vampires. So, like, hunters use syringes to inject vampires with dead man's blood, which is what Dean was trying to do earlier. And then some symptoms, which you see directly from Dean after he turns into a vampire, which is really cool. Like, you see it from his point of view, like heightened senses, like bright lights bother you. Like, you can tell the difference between the smell of a vampire and the smell of a human. Like, hearing is super heightened. You have super strength, super speed, stamina, regeneration, and fangs. And that's just interesting to see from Dean's point of view. And then now, like, following, like, common stereotypes, not following common stereotypes. So Boris and Robert's personalities are definitely very stereotypical. Like, Boris reminds me a little bit of, like, Lord Ruthven and, like, Lestat in a way. And, like, he's very, like, cocky. He, like, holds himself to a very high degree. He's very sexual, like, very pansexual, bisexual, you know what I mean? Like, he's for everyone. And Robert you see less of, but he still is very cocky and kind of, like, holds himself to a high degree. And you kind of, like, the way that they act seems very stereotypical vampire. Also, the way of decapitation to kill a vampire is very common. The sunlight weakness and other vampire symptoms are very similar to the symptoms in other media. But something more interesting is the stuff that doesn't follow stereotypes. Like, the appearance, you look the same for the most part, except for your fangs, obviously. Vampires view and treat the alpha vampire as their god. They can see the reflection, like, in mirrors and that kind of stuff. You can be turned back into a human if you haven't drank from a human yet. So it's kind of like you're not fully turned into a vampire until you drink from a human. But even after you drink from a human, you don't really look different. So it's kind of more symbolic, I feel. Vampires have been hunted to near extinction by humans. So, like, the general public doesn't know about vampires, but hunters are very aware of vampires and they've hunted them for a very long time. And also mentioned before, like, they don't have a grave, so there's no way to, like, attack them except for them physically, like, fighting. There's no way to, like, attack their graves and that kind of stuff. So something that interested me a lot was, like, the alpha vamp as a god to these vampires. So he was created by Eve as the first vampire, and he sends them telepathic messages, kind of, you know, he has these vampires working under them, and they view him as their creator, and they worship him too, which honestly seems more, like, humane to me. Like, they kind of all live in this nest together. They view the alpha vamp, like, kind of as their god, their creator, their father. They call him their father a lot, and the alpha vamp will call vampires, like, his children. And so, like, it just seems very, I don't know, more humane to me, the way that they, like, follow that kind of religion in a sense. And also, the alpha vampire knows where purgatory is for some reason. That's kind of important. So what is Vampire trying to say with their depiction of vampires? So right here first, Vampire Dean versus Soulless Sam. Hunter's always good, vampire's always bad. Dean never kills or feeds from a human while in vampire form. He does struggle to fight this urge, but at the end of the day, he never does it. because he turns back. Some vampires drink from blood banks to not have to kill humans. There's a picture earlier you see of Robert drinking from a blood bag, but like they do that in this episode where like they don't really kill humans. They're more about making more vampires. Like they don't kill Kristen. Like Kristen turns into a vampire and she starts working for them, like even though it's forced, like she doesn't want to be there, like but she still isn't killed. And then they all live together in their nest and follow the alpha vamps as their god, like I talked about before. Like, they kind of like work as a family a little bit, in my opinion. Sam does nothing while Dean gets turned into a vampire. He actually wants Dean to get turned into a vampire. He doesn't tell Dean about the cure, even though he knows there is one, because him and Campbell have like talked before and he knows about the vampire cure. Sam really wants to find where purgatory is, and the alpha vampire knows where that is, so he wants Dean to like talk to the vampires and try and figure it out for him, but Dean doesn't know that Sam doesn't have his soul, and Dean doesn't know that Sam wanted him to be a vampire. So it's like there's a lot of conflict that stems after this episode, but Sam cares more about finding purgatory than Dean's health and life, and he kills without thinking, rarely eats/sleeps, and has a higher pain tolerance. And that part specifically is so interesting to me because basically Sam acts more vampiric than Dean, the literal vampire of this episode. Like, killing without thinking, not eating or sleeping, higher pain tolerance. Like, boy, that is so vampire. Okay. Anyways, vampires is a way to challenge the good in hunters. Overall, like, some vampires act more humane than hunters. Like, they're viewed very poorly by hunters, but there's, like, instances where vampires will, like, only consume animal blood or, like, won't kill humans, but they're still, killed by hunters because the hunters have a very black and white thinking and that, like, all monsters are bad, all vampires are evil. And, like, that kind of mindset that, like, especially Dean Winchester has a lot throughout the show, like, it makes the viewer at risk of, like, holding that same opinion of being, like, oh, vampires are, like, stupid and weak, and, like, they're basically all dying and dead off, and they're, like, mindless creatures who just want to feed off people. But, like, throughout the show, like, in this episode specifically, like, even though Boris acts in the typical vampire way, it kind of shows that, like, vampires are more complex than that, and that they do, and, like, they're not fully evil, and hunters are not always good, especially Sam in this episode. Like, he's a very horrible brother. Like, Dean could have, died, killing himself after turning into a vampire, and Sam wouldn't have really cared in the state that he was in because he didn't have a soul. So all of this kind of to say overall is that vampires are more complex in this show than the hunters want them to be. They want them to be these kind of like mindless, blood-sucking monsters so they can just like easily kill them and not feel any guilt about it, but they are more complex than that, especially because vampires used to be humans. Sometimes they're not even a vampire for very long, like they're recently turned. So like they have experienced more human life than they have vampire life, and they're still treated like a terrible, gross monster by hunters. And Dean turning into a vampire and like getting to see that for himself is like kind of eye-opening to him in a way. And yeah, that's about all. Anyways, here's a picture of me and Misha Collins I paid hundreds of dollars for back in 2019, and that's about it. Thank you. Oh my god, that was so long. I think I went over 10 minutes there, and I like messed up at one part, but I think I'll do better tomorrow. But I don't know, it's like bad. Look, guys, this is what I was supposed to do, and I think I like did not do that. Look, she says like brief summary of the plot, but I literally like I'm pretty sure I take up like half the presentation with showing the plot. Or like at least like 5 minutes. Like, like if I'm supposed to be doing 10 minutes, I take up like 5 minutes with the plot. I don't know how to be shorter with the plot. Ugh. I'd have to like change around the whole presentation to make it better, but I really don't want to because it's due tomorrow and I have other homework, so I think I'm just gonna have to live with it like that. Whatever, let me go back to the very first slide so I can make that my the thing. Okay, there we go. Okay, Command Shift 3. There we go. Okay, perfect. I actually forgot how to end these. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this was recording. If I have to redo this entire thing, I'll be very pissed off. It might be like Command Shift 5 to end this. But yeah, comment, like, subscribe. Let me know how bad I did on this presentation, because I think I did really bad. But it's okay. Okay, bye. I did it.